Hey guys, welcome to Cyborg Kitty. In this video, we are going to talk about sorted union. So it's one of the functions on Free Code Camp. What they want us to do is create a function which is going to take two or more arrays as input. So we know the minimum number of arrays coming in is two, but can be more than that. As far as the maximum goes, it can be any number. They did not specify that. And the return value is going to be one single array of unique values in the order of the original provided array. So for example, if you are looking at these three arrays and you're trying to somehow process through the function, the result should be 1, 3, 2, 5, and then 2 is already repeated. So at which point you wouldn't kick this one out of the array. Instead, you would actually not add this, somehow skip this and go to the next because they want us to save the initial order as they keep coming in. So that being said, first thing I want to cover is, as this says, it says two or more arrays as input. So at this point, we just got to use the arguments object that comes with the function. So if you actually run it, you could see the arguments object is the object that holds all the arguments coming into the function. And they are obviously shown by key value pair because it's an object. You have a position as key, and then the value of the argument as the value, of course. So to access one of the, or you to access one single argument, you just mention the position and you would get that argument. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to initiate a variable called result, and I'm going to save my first array in that because they want us to first of all keep the original order, and secondly, what I want to do is we know there at least going to be minimum two arrays given to us. So I'm going to keep the first array as a result, and then I'm going to compare each element in the second array, so on and so forth, third, fourth, depending on how many we have. Pretty much loop through each single array one after the other, and then only add elements that are not already in there. That way we get a whole new array with all the unique values. That's the game plan. Okay, so now we got the basic stuff down. Let's go ahead and write that loop, which is going to loop through rest of the arguments to do the compare and find out which ones are unique. So I'm going to initiate it to variable I equal to 0. Actually, it's going to be 1 because we're already using 0 in result. So I want to iterate it from the next position. And it's going to go till arguments dot length till it hits the end of the arguments, and it's going to increment by 1 position per iteration. Okay, here I'm going to just create a temporary variable in which I'm going to save the current array that we are working with. In this case, it's going to be argument at the position I. And now the next thing I'm going to use to actually update or mash up all the arrays is I'm going to use concatenate. So forget the logic for a bit on what we are concatenating. I'm just going to concatenate this just to show you how concatenate works. So how this happens is it just takes the array that you give here and adds it, links it to the end of this array, and then because it doesn't actually manipulate the initial array, we are saving this whole value that's returned back in result itself. That's how we got all this array here. So now the next step is somehow to kick out all the repeating elements in each array. So how do we do that? In this case, I'm going to use the function, the method filter to filter out the ones that are already present. So how we're going to filter it is we're going to filter this argument that is temporary argument in each loop, each array we are dealing with, and then filter, and then of course we got to write a callback function here. Function X. Okay, let me just make it look a little pretty. All right, so in here, I'm just going to do return result dot index of x is less than 0. Okay, so you see I've wrote up a bunch of code here. So what is it actually doing? I'm just going to go ahead and comment it out so we can talk about filter and index of. So first of all, the way index of works is it's going to check for the position of the element that mentioned in the array that's the methods associated are asked to check in. In this case, we're checking the result array for the index of 1. So when you run it, when you're looking for the index of 1, that would be 0. And then when you're looking for, let's say, 7, and then you run it, that's -1. So anytime you ask for a position of an element that's actually not in the array, you get a -1. So that's the reason why we are checking if this value. So how filter works is filter goes through each element in the array and then runs that element through the callback function we write. And if the logic turns out to be true, it filters that element in. If the return value is false, it filters that element out. So this whole piece of code returns a single array depending on what the Boolean value comes out with this comparison function. And all we're doing is we're just adding that array, concatenating it with the result and saving it back in the result. Okay, so that's how filter and index of work. So what we're doing is we are checking for each element in the processing array. If the element's index is -1 when we check in the result, that means the values that are already there in the result. If this value is not there, then add it. If it's already there, which means we'll get a positive value, a position, then don't add it, just skip it, just filter it out. So that's all we're doing here. And then once we iterate through all the arguments, we'll have unique values in the order they are in. All we got to do at the end is just return result. And then you run it. Awesome. Works out perfectly. So the little warning sign you see here, it's in regards to the function declared was using an outer scoped variable and which might lead to possible confusing, but we don't have to worry about that because it's just a result statement and it's a warning. It doesn't really affect the way your function works. It's just for you that if you it gets overly confusing because we are using an outer scoped element there. But either way, this works out fine. And in any case, if you somehow don't want to use filter, be like, ugh, I don't like the filter method. I want to be able to write or loop through the whole thing myself. What you can do is actually, let's just comment this out for a second. What we're going to do is we're going to write another for loop, which, because basically what filter does is filter just loops through each element and uses that function to either add it to the result array or not. So we're just going to pretty much write a for loop that's going to do it for you. So let's take that arguments dot length. Oh, wait. We're going to use arguments I dot length because we're already inside the I position. So we are actually dealing with one array and we want to iterate through each element in that array. And then you do J++. So now we'll be able to iterate through each element in the array through this inner loop. And what we're going to do is if same index of comes into picture again. So all you're going to do is if result dot index of, and which argument we're using is because it's already an array at, in the arguments position I, and then we're dealing with position j because kind of we're dealing with the 2D arrays because this is a list of arrays and then we're looking at the argument in that array. So that would be mentioned in a 2D array kinda. And then you look for the index of this particular argument, and if it is not there in result, then all you do is result dot push. You just add it into the result variable. Just gonna copy paste that. So if it is present, which means we get a positive value, then just don't do anything, skip to the next argument and do the whole thing all over again. So if you actually run it, it just works out fine as well. So all we did was, instead of actually writing another inner loop to loop through and then look for an if condition, we just using filter and concatenate to do this for us. Either way, you go this way or that way, it serves the purpose. I just wanted to show you two different kinds that you can write this function up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit that like button. If you want to see more of my videos, do check out my channel, Cyborg Kitty. I will see you on my next video with some more coding challenges. Until then, have fun coding. Bye!